Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being here today and for your continued coverage. As they should be, all eyes are on Hurricane Delta. I'm pleased to have with me again today Ben Schott of the National Weather Service in New Orleans. He'll speak to you in just a moment. We do have a fair amount to cover today, so I'll get to it. Last night, President Trump approved my request for a federal emergency declaration in advance of Hurricane Delta, and I appreciate his quick action. We submitted that request yesterday morning. He told me yesterday afternoon in a phone call that it would be approved, and then by the end of the day, it was. This is a big help for us to get in the best possible shape in advance of the storm, securing the knowledge that our federal partners are standing with us, and that we have the available resources and know that we're going to be sharing in the expenses as well. Unfortunately, Hurricane Delta is expected to make landfall in southwest Louisiana early tomorrow evening as a Category 2 hurricane, and very, very close to the exact location that Hurricane Laura made landfall just over a month ago. Unlike Laura, there are several differences, and Ben's going to get into this more later. But as it approaches our coast, Hurricane Delta is forecasted to be weakening rather than strengthening, and it's going to be a storm that moves faster. And it should be moving in a northeasterly direction rather than a due north direction. Having said that, it is very clear that southwest Louisiana is going to get more of a punch from this than we would like to see for sure, because we're still trying to recover from Hurricane Laura. So at this time, I'm going to ask Ben to come up, go over the details like we did yesterday. If you would ask questions of Ben if you have them, while he's at the podium, and then I'll come back up whenever he's finished to go through the rest of the prepared remarks.
Again, I'd like to thank the governor for having us here to discuss Hurricane Delta. And with that, we'll go ahead and jump right in. Quick overview. Hurricane Delta currently is expected to bring what would be easily labeled as significant impacts to Louisiana on Friday. Warnings and watches across much of the state are out right now. And so those are to be followed with whatever precautions that you want to take to protect yourself and your family over the course of the next 24 hours or so, while there's still any kind of window to do such things. Based on the current track, all of these conditions that I have listed there can be expected in some form in different portions of southern Louisiana, especially along the coastline. Life-threatening surge will definitely be an issue. And oops, I jumped ahead there. Damaging hurricane force winds will be impacting a good portion of southwest Louisiana. We will have heavy rainfall and some bands that will set up, so there'll be some areas with isolated flash flooding and possible river flooding on the other side of that. And then with any kind of landfalling tropical system, the possibility of tornadoes are there. So I'll kind of start off with the track that popped up just a second ago. And as you can see, at this current time, Delta is right in the center of the Gulf of Mexico and is currently strengthening. If you were to look at it on the satellite right now, you would see that it has a developing eye, and it's doing all the things that a hurricane would do if you're going to see a gradual, slow increase in strength, which is what we're seeing right now with it. It is expected to be a major hurricane as we wake up Friday morning, and so we are expecting it to reach a Category 3 level by 7 a.m. on Friday morning. And the last thing that I want to hit is that last bullet that's there, and impacts can and will happen outside of the cone. I know at times we tell people to not focus on the cone, not focus on the center line, and sometimes it adds confusion, like, well, shouldn't that be the worst place where impacts are going to be? And in some instances that is true, but understand the cone says that 66% of the time the center of the storm is inside that cone. It does not say anything about where the worst impacts are or where any of the impacts are. It is just an idea for a visual indication of where the most likely center line of that storm may go. So I want to definitely highlight that part because the impacts from Delta are going to be way outside of that cone as we move forward on Friday into Saturday. So here's the current watches across the area. You can see it's kind of an interesting split of southern Louisiana right now. If you're in southwest Louisiana, you're most likely under some form of a hurricane warning. If you're in southeast Louisiana, you are probably under some form of a tropical storm warning or maybe a watch for the very extreme portions of the state there in Washington Parish. But regardless, this is going to have a very large wind field with it. So that's the reason why the tropical storm warnings extend so far east. I'm not saying everybody there is going to see the worst of this storm, but you should be prepared for wind gusts to happen in the 35, 40, maybe 50 or more if you are in that area. Here in the Baton Rouge area where we are today, it's possible that some of those gusts may reach into the hurricane force gusts. They would not be an all-day event with that, but it's possible. So I bring this up that just because, again, you're not in the center line of the storm, which right now is mainly across southwest Louisiana, and I'll talk a little bit more about the threats there. I want folks outside of that area to understand that it's still possible for tree limbs to come down, some power outages in places, rotted old trees being pushed over, as well as some of the other threats that I'll hit on as we move through. So again, if you're in one of these areas, you need to prepare for possible threats that could affect you, and I'll kind of walk through those here in the next couple of slides. The first one is going to be the wind threat. Everywhere you see that darker purple color, that is an extreme threat area where wind gusts could exceed 110 miles per hour. So if you are anywhere basically from Lake Charles over to Lafayette up towards Alexandria, understand that you are going to have some likelihood of significant wind damage. Now you see that the purple doesn't extend all the way up to Alexandria and it moves into the red. The red is basically hurricane force winds up to about 110 miles per hour. So again, there is the possibility for a large portion of southwest Louisiana to have extensive wind damage. And as the governor's already mentioned, this is an area that's already been heavily affected. So with that, any debris left out will be more likelihood for missiles that could be thrown around with the wind. Could also help break open windows, which could also, at that point, then help lift roofs. There's all sorts of things with this scenario that makes this a worst-case situation for any of the portions of the state where landfall could be possible. If you are anywhere in that orange area there, it's possible that you will see anywhere from strong tropical storm force gusts to right on the borderline of hurricane force. So I mentioned that earlier with the Baton Rouge area. You can see they're right in the middle of that orange. So it's still something that even here in Baton Rouge, you're going to see some significant impacts possible with tree limbs, trees down. It's not just located just in southwest Louisiana, and it may be still a little breezy even in the far eastern portions of the state if you're over on the North Shore or the South Shore over near the New Orleans area. The next significant impact that I'd like to discuss is storm surge. Storm surge is one that's usually one of the greater killers when it comes for hurricane landfall. It's one that we're well aware of here in the state of Louisiana, especially after going through a number of storms over the course of this year. If you are in any of the areas that you see there in the purple, that is life-threatening storm surge. So basically right now that will extend through a large portion from about Morgan City over into Vermilion Bay. If you are in those areas, you can expect anywhere from 7 to 11 feet, definitely life-threatening storm surge. As you move a little bit to the west from the Vermilion Bay area, you work your way over towards the Rockefeller Wildlife area there. That portion there would see somewhere between 4 to 7, 4 to 8 feet. As you move a little bit towards Calcasieu Pass and you get into Lake Charles area there, anywhere from 4 to 6, maybe 7 feet possible in surge. And then as you continue to work your way over to the state line, that'll come down a foot or two. You'll notice there's even possibility for surge. Again, this is a large storm. It's going to have a very large wind field that extends out 140 miles from its center. And so you'll even have surge across portions of southeast Louisiana, though it won't be as a significant impact that we're going to see most likely from the Morgan City area across over to the wildlife refuge there at Rockefeller. But again, wide-reaching impacts well away from the center. It won't be something that will happen just in a very narrow area where it makes landfall. Rainfall is not the number one threat, but it can be a killer as well. If we see significant rainfall fall over the same areas with large bands setting up and not moving for a couple hours, it's not impossible to see 3-4 inches of rain an hour for a couple hours, and you can easily achieve the 6 to 10 inches of rain that it shows there in locally higher amounts. So because of that, flash flooding will definitely be a threat. This storm is going to hit in the evening, moving into the overnight hours. It's going to be dark outside. I mentioned this yesterday, and I'll mention it again today. Driving at night during heavy rain, during a hurricane landfall, is a very dangerous proposition. I highly recommend once the storm hits, you stay where you're at to try to move about. You don't know if that roadway is still there, if it's been possibly maybe washed out, depending on how much rain has fallen. You don't know how deep that water is, and you don't know if the water is moving at a significant pace that could actually pick up all vehicles. It doesn't really matter whether you're in a car or a large truck. All that stuff can be picked up and floated with just anywhere from 12 to 18 inches of water. It does not take a lot, even for the biggest of pickup trucks, for them to be floated and moved off the roadway. So again, this may not be the number one threat, but if anyone's thinking about trying to move about during the late night hours, Friday and the Saturday during the heart of the storm, understand this will be something, if you're in that red area, that could be an unfortunate killer for anyone who tries to move about during the heart of the storm. So quick takeaways with this is Delta is going to be a strong hurricane when it reaches the state of Louisiana. We are going to see the full palette of threats, whether it be high winds, damaging winds, structural damage, whether it be the heavy rainfall and flooding, or the storm surge on the coast. And with that, with every landfalling system that's possible also for tornadoes, those tend to be more on the eastern side of the system, so that could be something from the central portion of the state over into southeast Louisiana is where that threat would exist Friday night into Saturday morning. So with that, the last point there I'd like to mention is the last bullet there. And we're highly confident of this track at this point. It's really not that far from being here, and all the modeling is showing that southwest Louisiana is the most likely spot for this to arrive. Is it possible that there could be a small jog of 20-30 miles one way or another? Yes. We saw the same thing with Laura. Laura made a small jog to the east just as it was approaching the shore, and we could see something like that here. So which is why I give kind of a little area, the most likely landfall between Lake Charles and Lafayette. And if you're anywhere there or down towards the coast, that is the most likely area to see the very significant impacts from Delta on Friday night into the day on Saturday. Again, this is going to be a very fast-moving storm, moving at 15 to 17 miles per hour, and it should exit the state by the time we get into Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon. And at that point, we'll start to be seeing improving conditions across the area, so recovery or other efforts can maybe step in at that point. So with that, I'll wrap up my portion and open it up to any questions.
Laura pushed through with, as you know, hurricane force, in some cases winds all the way through North Louisiana. As this goes through Alexandria and the Monroe regions, what kind of wind levels can those regions see from this weakening storm?
Yeah, that's the benefit. This storm will be weakening at landfall all the way through, and probably in a fairly quickly fashion. It's very likely that there will be a significant amount of wind shear as the storm approaches the coastline. And so, though we're still telling everybody, prepare for a strong Cat 2 at least as it makes landfall, understand that as it does come on shore, and in those first 12 hours as it moves across the state, it will be rapidly decreasing in strength And so the likelihood of a similar destructive wind swath that we saw with Laura is just not likely with Delta. Now, will there still be maybe some hurricane force winds or gusts as far north as Alexandria? I can't say no to that. But the idea of it making it all the way across the state with such an amazing amount of destruction from the wind, that should not occur with this system because of that rapid weakening as it starts to come on shore. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Since yesterday, as you probably are aware, there have been numerous additional evacuations put in place. The mandatory evacuations presently are in place for all of Allen, Beauregard, Calcasieu, Cameron, and Jefferson Davis parishes. Mandatory evacuations are also in place for portions of Iberia, Jefferson, St. Mary, Terrebonne, and Vermilion parishes. As we announced yesterday, all state offices will be closed tomorrow. The National Guard currently has more than 2,400 guardsmen activated in support of emergency operations. In addition to all of their ongoing efforts, I did want to pause for just a second and thank them for the truly Herculean effort made down in Grand Isle to put 360 super sacks in place to fortify the Gulf Side Southwest Levee, which they were able to do and finish up in partnership with the CPRA. And speaking of the CPRA, the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority continues to track all 689 gates across the coastal zone. 305 of those gates are currently closed. That's up from 229 yesterday that were closed. Based on the current storm track and the overall forecast, we anticipate only operating a portion of the hurricane risk reduction system in the New Orleans area, but there will likely be a full operation of the Morganza to the Gulf levee system, which protects Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes. The Department of Transportation has buses engaged in evacuations, and they are staged in Calcasieu, Iberia, Lafayette, and East Baton Rouge parishes. The Cameron Ferry service will be halted at 11 a.m. Well, I guess it was halted at 11 a.m. earlier today, and tolls have been temporarily suspended on LA1 in Leeville. To reinforce what Ben said, no one should be out on the road driving during this storm, if at all possible. If for some reason you do have to venture out, don't drive through water standing in the road. And you can get updates on road conditions and closures by going to 511la.org. We'd ask you to please be very cautious about down power lines. All of those lines should be assumed to be live and charged with electricity. And all of these types of hurricanes do bring power outages, and certainly we expect to experience those with Hurricane Delta. Anyone needing shelter with respect to this storm should follow the guidance of local officials and their local Office of Emergency Preparedness. For the most up-to-date shelter information, you can also call 211, or you can text LA Shelter to 898-211. As of this morning, 6,679 people were being sheltered in Louisiana. The vast majority of those continue to be sheltered from Hurricane Laura. I know everybody's focused on Hurricane Delta, but as you know, the proclamation ends tomorrow on COVID-19, and I told you we would give you information today about what the executive order will do tomorrow. And a short while ago, I signed an executive order that will keep Louisiana in Phase 3 until November the 6th. As I mentioned last month when we went into Phase 3, with the generally applicable 75% capacity across many venue types, there just isn't a lot further to go in terms of loosening restrictions before we are fully back to normal. The major modification that we are making now is one that we announced earlier this week, and it has to do with alcohol sales at sporting events in parishes that meet their criteria in terms of their positivity, and they've opted into opening bars. And so we're going to allow alcohol sales at sporting events subject to the same types of restrictions. And that will be, there'll be a cutoff time during the day, but also individuals are not going to be allowed to congregate. They should be seated and so forth. By the way, as of this morning, 40 parishes have met the positivity rates necessary to qualify to opt in to have bars open for on-premises consumption. I believe 27 parishes of the 40 had in fact opted in. Otherwise, phase 3 will remain the same through November the 6th. We're going to issue additional guidance from the State Fire Marshal's Office on fairs and festivals, which will allow fairs and festivals to submit a plan for approval. These will be individualized plans, and working with the Department of Health, those plans will be evaluated. No fair festival will be allowed to go forward until further notice, at least, with more than 500 people at any one time. And the reason is quite simple. Unlike a ticketed event where you have assigned seating and you can assure that for the vast majority of time that people are present, they are physically distancing, that's just not the way fairs and festivals work. And what we're trying to avoid is a mass spread event here in Louisiana. I will tell you that the data continues to be encouraging in terms of positivity, cases, hospitalizations, and so forth. But it is also true that over the last week to 10 days, we have inched up in positivity from around 4.4% to 4.7%, and hospitalizations have increased 3 of the last 4 days. And it's not a drastic increase. I think we have about 46 more people in the hospital today with COVID-19 than we did coming out of the weekend. But generally speaking, the state is improved over what was the case just several weeks ago. And I am very mindful and appreciative of the fact that it's because of the work being done by the people of Louisiana. And I will tell you, your efforts to follow the restrictions and mitigation measures are the reason why that we continue to do better. It's your hard work to slow the spread by wearing masks, by social distancing when you're with people who are not part of your immediate household, washing your hands, staying home when you're sick, sanitizing your business. All of this really amounts to saving lives. And the progress that we have made and continue to make is because of these restrictions. And it's human nature to think, well, then every time we're doing better, we ought to shed the restrictions. But at some point you can't, because you know there just isn't much further to go before, or at least until, that vaccine is widely available and administered and we can get closer to normal. So we need to stay the course, keep our case count down, and when it comes to phase 3, that's what we're going to do. And for those of you who are wondering, all the mitigation measures that are in place were those recommended by the White House Coronavirus Task Force. They did recommend this week that we maintain those mitigation measures, and that was the message delivered to me personally by Dr. Deborah Birx when she visited Baton Rouge a couple of weeks ago. And she pointed out to me that the next couple of months are going to be incredibly important, especially as we see the advent of flu season and have time to figure out how significant the flu season will be. It's another opportunity for me to remind people to get their flu shot. It's more important this year than ever before, so even if you typically don't get them, go get your flu shot. I will also remind you that the mitigation measures that work to slow the spread of COVID also work to slow the spread of the flu. And that stands to reason because of the similarities of the way that those illnesses are spread. Today, we are reporting 526 new cases on 12,300 new tests. Sadly, we are reporting 5 deaths. Now, I think that number 5 is the lowest number of deaths we've reported in quite some time. And 5 is 5 too many. But it's another indication that we have been doing better. And as you know, the deaths are a lagging indicator. The first indicator as to whether you're doing well has to do with positivity, and then you see the cases, then you see the hospitalizations, and then finally you see the deaths. And so, you know, while every death is painful because we know that's a brother or sister, mother, father, that's somebody out there, not just a number. The fact that we can talk about 5 deaths and not 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 like we were doing at one point really is gratifying, and I hope we will continue to make progress, and very soon I will be able to stand up and say we had 0 deaths. I haven't had that ability in a very, very long time. Because of the storm, COVID community-based testing will pause tomorrow through Saturday in most parts of the state. However, in North Louisiana, this community-based testing will be available, particularly in Bossier, Shreveport, and Monroe. In addition to protecting yourself from COVID, please also remember to be very careful in the aftermath of the storm. With respect to Laura, there are 30 confirmed deaths that are attributable to the disaster. Only one occurred, only one, while the hurricane moved on shore. The rest had to do with things like carbon monoxide poisoning, electrocutions, people operating machinery like chainsaws, limbs and trees falling on people, and so forth. So be very, very careful in how you position yourself and ride out the storm, but also after that, as you go out and try to recover from it, clean up, and so forth. And if you suffer a power outage and you're going to use a generator, please avoid carbon monoxide poisoning by putting your generator at least 20 feet from your home in a well-ventilated area and not close to a window or a vent, not in a crawl space, not in a garage, and so forth. I also want to take just a moment to speak directly to the people of Southwest Louisiana. You know, it was just a few days ago that we were talking about Delta being a Southeast Louisiana strike. And of course, we don't want a hurricane anywhere in Louisiana. But at least at that point, we didn't believe that Southwest Louisiana was going to get hit again. Every subsequent revision of the track has moved the storm further to the west, and now landfall is forecasted in almost exactly the same areas landfall occurred with Hurricane Laura. And we believe that there will be hurricane force winds and storm surge in Southwest Louisiana, in the area of our state that is least prepared to take it. I know that the people all over Louisiana, in particular Southwest Louisiana, are very strong. They're very resilient. They're very faithful, and they're going to be tested here. But I want you to know we're going to do everything we can, working with your local partners, working with our federal partners, to put you in the best possible position to ride this storm out, and then to engage in the response and recovery just as quickly as we possibly can. But you need to finish getting your game plan in order if you haven't done that. Remember, we are in a COVID environment. Go to getagameplan.org. Remember that while we have every intention of getting to you as quickly as possible, should you need rescuing or any other assistance, you should plan as if the first 72 hours is on you. So have that supply kit loaded up as recommended by the getagameplan.org. And through it all, please, as we prepare for the worst, let's pray for the best, and let's join all our prayers together for the safety and protection of everyone. And with that, I will pause and take your questions. Greg.
Governor, since yesterday, there have been mandatory evacuations in populated areas. These 12 hotels have been consolidated to handle those people that were displaced. Is that enough to handle a new group or not?
Well, you know, I hate to give you this answer. It depends on how many people actually evacuate and need assistance. Now, I want to be very clear. the people in the 12 hotels, almost all of them are Hurricane Laura evacuees. And where we have parishes that are ordering evacuations, they are by and large setting up their own congregant shelters, by the way, with additional spacing for COVID, with the PPE, with all the restrictions in place. But for those individuals who do come to, for example, the mega shelter in Alexandria, we will shelter them there until that shelter is full, and then we will move them to other shelters that we have across North Louisiana. And then in immediate aftermath of the storm, if they cannot go home, we will be putting them up as quickly as possible in non-congregant sheltering, the hotels. And that's why we appreciate the assistance we've gotten from the federal government, because we know we can do non-congregant sheltering now as a part of our emergency protective measures, and that they're going to participate in that effort with us, and we'll continue to work with the Red Cross. But you never know how many people, especially when it's a voluntary evacuation, how many people are actually going to evacuate. And of those who evacuate, most are going to go to a family or to a friend's home. Others are going to go to a hotel on their own, and so forth. And then you will still have some who need some help. Those are the ones that we typically receive, some of whom drive up and some of whom need transportation. And all of this has to be coordinated. And by the way, I'm glad you asked the question, Greg, because it's a significant point I want to bring up. If you are going to evacuate and shelter with people who are not normally part of your immediate household, which is, I think, by definition what we're talking about, whether they are your relatives, whether they're your best friends, whatever, you need to socially distance in those homes. The vast majority of COVID is spread by people who are related to one another, or people who are close neighbors, or very close friends, and so forth. So be very careful in these homes in this situation, so that we can keep the case count down. Yes, ma'am, Melinda. Yeah, so I'm always concerned that people in mandatory evacuation areas don't heed that and aren't listening to their local officials. They don't appreciate the gravity of the storm as it approaches. And sometimes these people will appreciate it, but it comes really late when it's kind of dangerous for them to move and so forth. And what we're encouraging people to do is, while there's still time to get into the best possible position, to follow the guidance you're given by your local elected officials, your OEP directors, as to whether you should evacuate, and then they will also have information about sheltering. I will tell you, I haven't gotten a report from DCFS this afternoon. As of this morning at the UCG meeting, the flow of individuals who are in fact evacuating, those that are coming to our shelters, has been quite manageable, I will tell you. But you all can remember that after Laura, and I hope that this doesn't happen in this case, the number of evacuees that we were sheltering continued to increase for right at 2 weeks. Every night we were sheltering more people than we were the night before. And so, you know, I don't believe we're going to see that with this particular storm, but you never know. But what I can tell you is we're going to move heaven and earth to get people out of that congregant shelter just as quickly as we possibly can, because we want people to be safe in this COVID public health emergency. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
In terms of the phase 3 extension, did you have any conversations with legislators ahead of time about this extension? Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation about lack of communication.
Yeah, well, I did personally. I had an opportunity to speak to the Speaker and to the President, showed them much of the same data that I was given by the Office of Public Health. So we did. And we also had the opportunity just 2 weeks ago with Dr. Deborah Birx being here to get the Speaker and the President, but also I believe it was Senator Cleo Fields and Representative Ray Garofalo, to go to a meeting where she was at, where she recommended that we continue these mitigation measures, and talked about how important the next a couple of months will be. So I believe that we did check those boxes adequately. I'm sure there are some legislators who would tell you otherwise, because quite frankly, they don't want any restrictions or mitigation measures in place, and so there's no communication you can have with them that's going to be satisfying. But at the end of the day, we're doing what's right and what's warranted under the circumstances to protect the public health of the people of Louisiana. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to change it up a little bit. We'll have a UCG meeting at 10:30. We will come over at 1 o'clock for what will be, in all likelihood, the final pre-landfall press conference. We won't have Ben Schott, so you'll get the weather update from me, but I will study hard, Ben, based on what you tell us at 10:30. And so we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I do want to welcome back to Baton Rouge Tony Robinson, Administrator of FEMA Region 6. He's been spending a lot of time here in Louisiana. We're glad to have you here. And for those of you who just don't know, it is very, very helpful to have people like Tony here embedded with you as you make decisions, because you can cut down on the amount of time necessary to make the right decision and do things in the correct way to ensure that there's no undue delays, that you do things right the first time, and that you're going to be reimbursed for those things on the back end. Not that everything's perfect, but we can always work better and smarter and faster when we have people like Tony embedded here. And so we thank him and all the folks at FEMA for the assistance that they've been providing. And I did neglect to tell you that I've had a couple of phone conversations with Administrator Peter Gaynor, the administrator of FEMA, and he's been very helpful as well. So we're going to see you at 1 o'clock tomorrow. I'm encouraging one final time everybody in the path of this storm to use the time that you have available to put yourself and your family in the best possible position to ride out this storm. Let's prepare for the worst, and let's continue to pray for the best. And I have all the confidence in the world in the people of Louisiana, in their goodness, their decency, their generosity, their hardworking people, but also, and maybe primarily, in their faith. That if we'll pull together, as we've always done, we're going to get through this, and we will get people's lives right side up again just as soon as possible.